A warm welcome to Aviation this week on Channels Television. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Bukola Joe Ukitumbi. Following the Nigeria-United Arab Emirates diplomatic spat, the federal government is insisting that Nigerians have the right to travel directly to Dubai without flying Emirates Airlines. The federal government believes this position is discriminatory against Nigeria, as the United Arab Emirates alleges that the decision it made is because some Nigerians before now were arriving in that country with fake COVID-19 test results. On this edition, we re-examine this issue and how some concerned partners in the aviation industry in other countries are asking their countries to reopen borders in the face of economic and job losses. Our background report is next.
Domestic passengers passing through the local terminal as travel in the country continues to surge owing to the rate of road insecurity.
Usually I book online. The only thing I observed was that as at the time I was booking, almost all the flights are fully booked, and I have to scramble for the best alternative that suits my traveling plans. And more so, like I just mentioned, it was also still rescheduled, disrupting my plan that by now I should have been in Abuja, but I have to make with the best alternative. All I know is that this flight was earlier scheduled for 11 and is now shifted to 2 o'clock. I only pray that that time is respected and we can board by 2 and get to my destination.
If you get it to travel in 4 days' time, you can have it at 28,000 or 31,000. But if you want to get it at the counter, you may get it at 50-something thousand or 60 or 40.
Despite the Emirates airline spat with Nigeria, the international terminal is also busy as Nigeria more than 9 months ago opened its air borders with several countries. However, passengers must perform a COVID-19 PCR test not more than 72 hours before boarding.
Compared to pre-COVID time, it started gradually and is coming up. Some airlines have stopped coming. The European carriers started late. That is KLM, Air France, and Lufthansa. They didn't start when the others started, but they started and full swing.
While travel access in and out of Nigeria is not bogged down with restrictions, the same cannot be said of other countries, especially in Europe. In Britain, British pilots, cabin crew, travel agents and other workers are asking politicians to save the summer holiday season by reopening routes abroad or risk destroying tens of thousands of jobs as companies fail. Workers from the travel industry at a recent demonstration. Protesters outside Parliament held banners saying pilots speaking up for travel, alongside cabin crew in full uniform as they sought to highlight the threat to their jobs from the government's strict rules.
We've had no help from the government. We need a dedicated grant.
England is expected to reopen from a third COVID-19 lockdown in July, but the travel sector remains effectively shut, with the government advising against travel except to a handful of destinations.
I'd like them to get us flying again safely. If they can't get us flying again, I'd like to see them looking at extending the furlough scheme for the entire industry, not just the airlines, but the entire travel industry. And with a view to giving out some specific help to individual airlines as they need it. Some of these airlines will need more help than others.
British government ministers are examining ways to reopen travel more broadly and are considering plans to ditch quarantine requirements for vaccinated adults and their children to some destinations.
We want the Prime Minister to pay a proper attention to what's happening to this vital industry. If he were here next to me now, I'd be saying, number one, sort out your traffic light system. Nobody understands it. Nobody knows why more countries aren't going onto the green list. And secondly, look at the economic damage that's being done to the whole of this sector. My pilots, the cabin crew, everybody else in the sector are in fear of losing their jobs, have had pay cuts, have been on furlough. The sector needs more support.
To survive more than 15 months of travel restrictions, companies including British Airways, EasyJet, TUI and Jet2 have taken on billions of pounds of debt. Under the government's traffic light system, only travellers to a small number of green list countries can avoid quarantine.
Adding companies to the green list is absolutely vital now. Nobody can understand the criteria for putting companies on green or amber or red. The review mechanism is totally opaque. There's no evidence or science that's been produced by the government. My members are pilots. They expect to see a rational, methodological approach to this that they can understand, and at the moment they don't. So we need to see countries like Malta, the other Mediterranean islands, the Canaries and the US route being looked at positively to go on the green list.
For Britons, their popular European holiday destinations, including France, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain and the United States, are rated amber and require returning passengers to take 3 expensive COVID-19 tests and isolate for 10 days on return.
Well, even the best scenarios at the moment say that international travel isn't going to come back to normality for 4 years. If we lose this summer as well, I don't know how some of the travel companies, some of the airlines are going to be able to survive, because with no money coming in, how can they continue to run their operations? So it is urgent. We need steps to be taken right now.
Still in Europe, but this time in Portugal, as the country will be imposing stricter COVID-19 rules across the Lisbon region as authorities try to control a rise in infections that threatens Portugal's summer holiday season. The measures, prompted by a surge in coronavirus cases, especially in and around the capital, are reviewed on a weekly basis but are likely to remain in place until the situation improves. The jump in infections comes around a month after tourism-dependent Portugal opened to visitors from the European Union and Britain. More than half of coronavirus cases in Lisbon are of the more infectious Delta variant, first identified in India but rapidly spreading in Britain.
To shed more light on the Nigeria-Emirates issue, here is an excerpt from the Minister of Aviation's speech at a recent Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 briefing.
Emirates in particular, and with some airlines, if you remember, including KLM and so on, gave us some conditions that were not acceptable to us because they don't make scientific sense. And after review, some of these airlines, especially KLM, withdrew their position and saw sense in what Nigeria presented, that you can do tests 48 hours or 72 hours before you leave and do another test on arrival. Emirates at that time wanted us to do a test 48 hours before, then come to airport when we're cocksure we're negative, and it's only 48 hours, it's not yet the incubation time, and do an antigen test, rapid test at the airport. And then fly 7 hours later and do another test in Dubai, and then follow to the, your hotel or your accommodation and do another test. That dragged on, and in the interest of our people, and I think cordial relationship, even though it was a commercial decision for the airline to take at any point in time, we ceded and accepted that, well, those tests that don't make scientific sense to us and that will continue to show negative, because they are within the incubation period, we will continue to do them at the expense of our people and their monies. So we accepted what Emirates had presented, and we said we'll proceed, even though KLM and other airlines saw the reason and rationale and also towed the line of Nigeria. In this case, Emirates insisted again that, okay, in addition to the test 48 hours before, the antigen test, the test on arrival, and further test and test and test, in addition also that you cannot fly into UAE except through the airlines, which is Emirates airline. But if you choose to do so on another airline, for example, you want to follow Ethiopian or Qatar or Turkish or any other airline for that matter, you must remain in that country of that particular airline for 2 weeks if you are a Nigerian before you continue to Dubai. Meaning that if I buy my ticket, I have the choices in a free market, which Nigeria and UAE practice. In a free market, if I buy my ticket on Ethiopian I must remain in Addis Ababa, whether I have a visa or I don't have a visa. I must remain in Addis Ababa for 2 weeks before I progress to Dubai. Or if I chose to go through Doha in Qatar, or through Istanbul in Turkey, or Cairo in Egypt, etc., etc. So you must go by Emirates. And of course, Nigerians, majority of Nigerians are petty traders, and the ticket of Emirates, in this case, may be higher than that of Ethiopian, but they must follow Emirates. So civil aviation is guided by agreements, by international convention, by a norm, by a practice. It is only one aviation. There's no aviation B. So we found this position to be discriminatory against our country and is therefore not acceptable. And so the decision is not only that of aviation alone, it involves every other member of this PSC and other ministries that are not here represented, especially that of foreign affairs. So we thought we could take that diplomatically, and we have been meeting and exchanging and showing them the reason and rationale why they cannot be country-specific. Because at some point, they said the reason why they are being very hard on Nigeria because there are fake results. And I stood on this platform and I said that, well, there are fake results also in UAE, as much as in Germany, as much as in UK or US. All over the world, there are fake results. But Nigeria went ahead to put this barcode in such a way that once you have a fake result, with your own phone, you scan it here, you see whether it is authentic or not. We've gone extra mile. Plus, if you look at the rate of infection and the rate of people catching COVID in Nigeria, we are far, far, far less than many, many countries in the world, which UAE did not apply that principles upon. In one of our discussions, they said, well, it's also the same case with South Africa. I want to put it on record that South Africa as a country wrote and demanded that condition be applied upon them. So it's their own choice. But it is not the choice of Nigeria that we should be excluded and we should be discriminated against. It is not our choice. We're still talking, and we'll likely escalate the matter. And I'm sure that we will resolve it very soon.
Egypt is optimistic about welcoming more visitors this year, with numbers increasing steadily since January to around 500,000 tourists a month. Tourism revenue is an important source of foreign currency for Egypt, and this plunged by 70% in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic.
We are very optimistic about the resumption because we received about 3 million tourists since the resumption, since the beginning of July 2020. But the numbers are increasing since January 2021. Now we are receiving around 500,000 tourists per month. More than 65% of them are coming to the Red Sea and the South Sinai Governorate because they are open air spaces and water activities, and it's exactly what the tourist is seeking after the COVID. As for the revenue, now we are running around 50% of our numbers before the pandemic. So it's a loss of 50% of our income, around $500,000 per month.
Tourism in Egypt usually accounts for up to 15% of the country's gross domestic product. Monthly tourism revenues stood about $500 million in April, half of what they were before the pandemic. But Egypt hopes for a recovery by the end of the year, when it aims to have vaccinated tourism staff in resorts along the Red Sea and name the area a COVID-free destination. Egypt and Russia in April agreed to resume all flights between the two countries. Flights to resort destinations Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada were suspended after a Russian passenger plane crashed in Sinai in October 2015, killing 224 people. News Flash is next after the break. Do join us again. Post-pandemic, cargo handling business in Nigeria appears to be coming back strong. both in the first and second quarter of 2021, as aviation handling companies made more profit than that same period in 2020.
Cargo is improving, and we are expecting that the 2019 figures will be back. I believe this year we should be able to do at least 12 million kgs this year from each of those air handling companies. That's from Sakol and NACO. The cargo warehouses were not structured for exportation before, but now they are beginning to realize that the system, the metrics are changing. Exportation now is becoming a big deal in Nigeria. The challenge there is that the space or the warehouses for export is still very small.
It is still necessary that the directors and
Top management of one of the cargo companies agree the business is looking good, but adds that the federal government comes to the aid of organizations in the sector, lamenting that the impact of COVID-19 in the industry still persists.
by giving palliative measures, which will be something that has to do with everyone. I mean, people will be happy, and every Nigerian will actually pay for him more. There are so many other things in business we want to do that adds to what we are doing now. Once we have that data on board, I think we'll do much better than where we are now.
The era of this pandemic, it has been quite difficult, especially for the aviation sector, which is where we primarily play. But, to the glory of God, especially with the cargo division of our operations, we're able to stay afloat.
While commercial airlines are still struggling to come out of the woods after they recorded losses from their passenger businesses in 2020, cargo handling companies were able to avoid a similar fate. The cargo aspect of their revenues has witnessed an increase over the years as airlines continue to lift goods, especially essential items such as medical supplies and personal protective equipment during the pandemic. The Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirikas, praised the efforts of the Nigerian Space Management Agency for procuring 2 mobile towers in a bid to boost air navigation in the country. The 2 mobile control towers cost about 1.7 billion naira. The minister explained that equipment will be deployed to the Murtala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos and the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja and any other airport that may require the facility. Despite an upswing in the global price of crude oil and attendant blessings for oil-producing countries, the price of aviation fuel has spiked nationwide, and much to the pains of airlines and travelers in Nigeria. Recent statistics show that aviation fuel, also called Jet A1, has lately sold for between 285 naira per litre at airports in the south and between 300 to 320 naira per litre in low-traffic aerodromes in the northern region of the country. The price has been rising steadily in the last 2 years as it hovered around 160 and 170 naira in 2019.
There is no one answer that fits all. This issue has been there for a number of decades. It's been over the years. In the past, we've had to look at it to say that, okay, maybe because we had 6 operators, maybe it was at a point that we even thought it was cartel. But there's nothing like cartelization. We even increased it to 9, and even from 9 it has gone to 15. Today we probably even have so many operators that are just even operating under under the radar. But yet it has not solved the situation. So the situation with aviation fuel in Nigeria is about supply. We've got the opportunity for about 100,000 metric tons opportunity, but we've not been able to optimize more than 50% of it at any one point. So we lose all this volume to foreign countries, and we lose all this volume even to internally. And because you also know that there are so many people being recruited from the road into the traveling hub of the air, based on so many reasons that we all know, this is just a time
that we cannot afford to disappoint the airline industry. It will affect them so badly because the idea is that if you get to an airfield and you don't have enough fuel to move, it becomes, a major challenge.
At London City Airport, the air traffic controllers have gone. Perched above the terminal building, the old control tower with its panoramic windows is empty of controllers. Monitors, a few pens and some hand sanitizers are all that remains. City became the world's first major international airport to switch to a remote digital tower earlier this year and went public less than 2 weeks ago. The airport, nestled beside former dockyards a few miles east of London's Canary Wharf financial district, is London's smallest. Before the pandemic, it had 5 million passengers a year, mostly traveling on business to European destinations like Frankfurt and Amsterdam. City planes now take off and land guided by air traffic controllers who are based 90 miles away. They direct the airport using information from a newly built taller control tower stacked with 16 high-definition cameras and multiple sensors. The switch to remote air traffic control has raised a few eyebrows, but London City's chief operating officer says so far it has worked seamlessly.
So the existing air traffic control tower was over 30 years old and required some significant investment to upgrade it. We also have implemented some new aircraft stands and we needed to change the location of the air traffic control tower. So we've moved location, and this is our new digital air traffic control tower. We cut over to that on the 23rd of January this year and began operating first flight from the 24th. And what that does is deliver digital air traffic control capability, and it's the first of its kind anywhere in the world at this scale.
Metal spikes guard the top of the 50-meter tower to protect the cameras from birds, and each camera has a self-cleaning mechanism that stops insects and debris from blurring images. Those images then travel multiple separate high-speed fiber links to the remote center in Swanwick, Hampshire, where London City's air traffic controllers are relocated. The live sound of the airport is piped into the new control center so that controllers still hear the plane's engines roaring into life and the reverse thrust of touchdown. And the 14 screens in the Swanwick control center are not at risk from a buffering internet or lost connection.
We're used to dealing with data and presenting that data to our controllers so that they can keep the aircraft separate, safely apart whilst they travel. So it's much the same here for the tower. We're using the data, we're presenting the pictures. We can see it, you can see it behind me. It's very much like sitting in the tower and seeing the aircraft operating. So it's a digital reproduction of the live picture. What you're seeing today is the live picture at London City. Then enhanced with additional data like aircraft call sign, maybe the route that it's going to, maybe the stand that it's going to. It allows us to add all of that to the data. So are there risks? Well, we think we've got all the risks well covered. So cybersecurity is well covered, for example. In terms of the job for the controller, it's very much like doing it in the same way as they would in the air traffic control tower.
The airport's plan for a remote tower dates to 2016, when it realized that in order to go ahead with a £500 million expansion plan to fit in extra bigger planes, it would need to significantly invest in the old control tower. It decided instead to build a new one, given the efficiency benefits offered by a new remote technology developed by Swedish company Saab. Heathrow, Britain's busiest airport, is also considering remote control towers in its future plans. This is our final destination on Aviation this week. See you next time, God's willing. I'm Bukola Joe Uketumbi.